Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I have interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of songwriters about the writing process. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So I've always been interested in treating songwriters the same way that we treat poets and traditional prose writers, as writers, plain and simple. There is no talk of how bands get their name, favorite tour stories, favorite foods, band drama, or anything else. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers as we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. That's it, nothing else. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today's episode is with Uwade. Uwade's debut album, Florilegium, is out on 30 Tigers Records. It is fantastic. And I do hope I pronounced the title correctly, Florilegium. Those Latin terms always trip me up. You may already know her voice, though, if you are a Fleet Foxes fan. On their 2020 album, Shore, their opening track, Waiting in Waist High Water, that is her voice. So check out that too. But her debut again, Florilegium, is I love it. I'm listening to it a lot over the past couple of weeks. And here's the other reason why I love this conversation. You may have heard me mention a few times on the pod, I have a PhD in English language and literature. And when I was getting my PhD, I don't know how I was able to do anything else. It's kind of all consuming. Whether you're doing classwork or your dissertation or anything like that. Well, Uwade is getting her PhD in the classics right now. And she's in her first year, so taking classes. And I don't know how I'm just so impressed by the fact that she's able to be a songwriter, put out an album, and also be a full-time student. So you can bet we, of course, talked about how you juggle both of those things and kind of the intersection between classwork and academic writing and songwriting, two very different things. One of the things, obviously, that one of the differences is when you're writing songs, you grab the songs out of the ether, right? That's what songwriters always tell me. They reach up into the air and pull those songs out of thin air, but you don't really have the luxury of pulling things out of thin air when it comes to academia. There's a very different type of writing, much more disciplined. So that was a focus, one of the focuses of our conversation, but we talked obviously a lot about books here, about whether she likes a pen or a pencil. And you'll have to wait for the answer on that one. It's a good one. But again, the debut album is fantastic, Florilegium, but I cannot really stress how impressed I am with her ability to juggle these two worlds. So anyway, the album is out. It is great. Or you may be out by the time you listen to this. I'm not sure. It's out April 25th on 30 Tigers. So check it out. Here is my pod with Uwade. As a songwriter, Is it important to create in some fashion every day? Or do you feel like by doing that every day, you may force things and things become derivative?
Yeah, I mean, I think so the difference between what I think is important and what I actually do is there is a difference. I think it is important to at least try to create the space to do something every day. Um, Even if it doesn't mean actually doing something, but just like having a moment of just sort of re-entering one's body and observing the world around one. I think just having like a moment for like receptivity, even if nothing comes out of it, like even if it's just going on a walk and like letting yourself think about nothing and look at the trees, that itself can turn into something. But I don't think it means you have to actually write lyrics every day. I think that's quite hard. I think life is complicated. I'm not doing that. Certainly not at this phase in my life. Yeah.
So when you talk about being receptive, is that being passively receptive or active? I mean, because I hear that a lot of songwriters say, the antenna is always up, but a lot of them things tend to just filter in. They don't have to consciously be aware of those things. So how conscious are you when you're receptive?
I think it's I think it's an active thing. I think you can I mean, we see it all the time with like, thinking about how we engage with social media versus engaging with real things in the world. Like I am very receptive when I'm scrolling through my Instagram Explore page, but it doesn't mean I'm like I'm paying attention. I think there's a difference between paying attention with it, which I think is an active thing. It's like a striving to engage with something. And I think that's important. Like I think the antenna model is like there's some truth in it. I think you sort of have to try and like you put up the antenna and then something comes, but I think you have to pay attention, which is active and receptive at the same time.
How about the voices, quite literally, the conversations around you, things people say? Do
Mm.
those things ever inspire you? Oh, that's a cool phrase. That's a cool line.
Yeah, I would say listening to people is less. I think I do more like, something that I read sticks out to me or like a phrase that someone writes. But I don't know, maybe I'm too selfish to bring other people's conversations into like I don't want the input. I just want the pure thought that comes up. But yeah, I would say sometimes like a speech or a conversation that I have with someone will impact me, but I don't do that much eavesdropping.
You'd be surprised number of songwriters who confess that they, let's just call it eavesdropping. I don't know any other way. Those who will sit at a bar. I mean, they've been on the podcast, so I'm not just disclosing secrets, but they
Okay.
talk about how I think I had Britt Daniel on from Spoon once, and he told me that he will sit in a bar with his laptop open and listen to conversations. And I thought, wow,
Wow.
if you ever see that guy at a bar, sitting at a bar, and he's got his laptop open, be careful what you say. Um,
Whoa. Huh.
so, okay, so I want to ask you. I want to dive right into to your I guess other career, and that is as a PhD student. So my PhD is in English language and literature. Just as an aside, my specialty is or was 20th century American theater, dramatic literature, playwrights.
Oh, very cool.
And I don't know that I had time to do anything. Um, once it really got down to it. I mean, with classwork. So I guess I'm just curious not that you should know right now, maybe you do. I certainly didn't know my first year, but do you have plans on the area you want to go into?
Yeah, I think I'm interested in right now. So I did my undergrad and master's theses on like fable in ancient Greco-Roman intellectual culture, this like, popular form that was sort of like lower class and non-elite, but that ends up being used everywhere and people are always citing them and like using them to get crowds on their side. And so I was interested in this like strange tension of like something being both like non elite or seen as non-intellectual, but then being used in those spaces. But that has since sort of, I also have interest in like the sort of African and African American receptions of classics and thinking about how people have engaged with the field and thinking about the relationship between ancient enslavement and literature. So broadly, those are the also the other paths that I might want to take. But we'll see. Like you said, there's no time to do anything else. So I don't know how I'm going every day, but I'm going and it's something is happening one foot in front of the other. Yeah.
I started out thinking I was wanted to go into poetry. Um, that was going to be the plan, and it happened. I took is not and nothing more complicated than I took an American 20th century American theater class, and I just fell in
Wow.
love with it.
That's amazing.
Dramatic literature. I should be very clear that there's a
Mhm.
difference between American theater and dramatic literature. Mine's from a literature point of view, but that's all it took was one class. But I was also not writing songs, so on the side. So I'd love to know how are you actually. I mean, I'm sure that you're probably pretty disciplined. I'd love to know, I guess, what your routine is. Like, how are you finding time to do that? But I guess this is a two-parter, and that is, do you feel like that academic pursuit makes you more disciplined
Mm.
when it comes to songwriting?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, how am I finding time to do well, I think, the good thing about releasing an album is that in a way, I've done a lot of the songwriting that I'm now sharing, so I've sort of seen this time as, like, an opportunity to step away from a more, like, disciplined routine and just let it be, like, an outlet and a way to to relax or to process or to so now it's more so that I'll write or I'll, mess around on my guitar, um, or make space for thinking about doing those things after I've done, like, you know, 3 hours of translation, and I don't feel like looking at another word on the page. So, I think it feels more, like, luxurious now that I get to I get to play music more than I'm sort of disciplined and feeling like I need to sit down and do this or else nothing will come. Yeah, just being realistic about the time that we all have, is important. And then your second question was
Has the discipline that you apply to being, an academic,
yeah.
does that translate well? So, for example, um, songwriters tell me that once how much more disciplined they are when they have children because they have so little time. If you have 12 hours a day, it's easy to sit around. But if Junior is going down for a nap for an hour, you're going
Yeah,
to write for an hour
yeah.
because your time is so much more unlimited. So, yeah, that was my question was, is that does what you're doing in the academic side, does that make you more disciplined as a songwriter?
That's a good question. Um, that's interesting. I'm trying to think of if it has. I think as of right now, like, perhaps if I were sort of in my dissertation phase and it was like I had to create my own schedule of, like, I have to write, I have to produce, and then I also wanna be songwriting, that might be more of a clear sense of discipline, but right now, it's like, I don't know if you remember your first year, it's just sort of like trying to drink water out of a fire hose, like, it's just, like, there's just so much information, and I'm even trying to, like, you know, discipline myself academically. Um, so I would say I definitely maybe think of songwriting in a more literary way now, even if it doesn't mean that I'm like practicing it um, with like a very clear set of structures and routines. So
So I'm going to ask you a couple of very specific questions when it comes to the process. So when you're writing lyrics, are you a pen and paper person or a computer person?
pen and paper.
I was going to say, given what you're studying, I'd be distressed if you were like a phone or a computer person. So that's good.
Mm.
Now, pen or pencil? You said pen.
Ooh, yeah, pen.
Okay. Now I'm going to get even more specific because you'd be surprised how particular songwriters are. Is there a certain color of ink and or brand of pen that you prefer?
Ooh, well, I think in my life, yes, I love Muji, 0.38 millimeter ballpoint pens. I don't know if they're ballpoint or gel. I think they're ballpoint. I have some with me. These are like the only pens I use. Oh. And it means that I also use them for songwriting. This is my pen.
Yes. Now, let me also say that as many times I've asked that question, no one's actually given me the specific millimeter that they enjoy that they use. So I love the specificity of it.
Yeah, I've tested a lot of pens and pencils, and I like this is the winner for me. This is the winner.
And black ink, was that black ink?
Black ink, yes.
So why black ink? Why not blue? I or another color?
Oh, it's just too whimsical, other colors are not serious enough. This is me telling myself, "We gotta get real." There's no going back, there's no fun and games. black ink is a declaration in my mind, whereas blue ink is like play. This is
Mm.
this is serious. Yeah.
And how about paper? What kind of paper?
I have a I love moleskin notebooks in general. Um, but I would say I like plain paper. I don't like lines on paper because I like to create my own lines. Mm. Or not create my own lines, but I just write. I write very sort of straight on the page. Um, so that's kind of my only requirement. I can do different types of paper, but just not lined paper.
The moleskin thing, that's a very controversial subject because some people feel that by that makes it too precious, puts too much pressure on people. A lot of songwriters will tell me that they will intentionally write on the back of like you know utility bill envelope or something like that because they don't want to because there's too much pressure if they make it look precious.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that, but I also just like I have a habit of journaling anyway in Moleskine, so the things I write in my journal are not precious at all. So I don't have that association of like I just like it. I like it to feel preserved. I think that's just my thing with the notebooks. It feels like it's sort of a ritual and like I'm preserving my thoughts, whatever they may be. So, yeah.
Before I ask about the journaling, one more follow up to the pens. So if you write something that you don't like, are you crossing it out with a single line or just scribbling furiously so you can't see anything?
Mm, usually scribbling furiously, so I can't see anything.
So why is that?
Because I don't even want to know. I don't even want, when I look back, I don't want to remember what terrible idea I thought was a good one, you know? So I just like to make sure it's out completely. But sometimes I do use pencils for that reason because then you can erase. But more and more, I'm like, no, I want to stand by my declarations and then completely try to, you know, eviscerate them if I don't like them. So,
See, for I agree. I do the same thing. For me, it was because they teach you that trick when you take the standardized test that the answers that you know are wrong, draw a line through them so you don't even look at them. Like they're not even in your consciousness. So that's why I do it. Is like I just don't want to see it because if I can see even anything about it, then it's still in my mind.
right.
Okay, now the journaling. Is that something that you do every day? And do those things lead to song ideas, or do you separate them so that I guess so that sometimes people will journal, but they intentionally don't use those for song ideas because it's a good way to separate those two things, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely separate them. Whether I journal every day. I haven't been so much recently because I also think journaling is taking a different shape for me. Because when I first started, it was very much about unraveling a single issue or idea or thing that I was thinking about. And then it later became just like a chronicle of my day, which I didn't really love. And I was like, I don't know, why am I just writing about what happened? But I'm trying to find a balance between the two. So now it's a mix of one day I write everything that happened, one day I write about a specific thing. But I think the more often you write, the less you feel, or for me, the less I feel pressure to write about my day because I'm including that in my unraveling of a thought. So, yeah.
Do you go back to those? Do you go back to the journal sometimes? I'm sure they're all somewhere. So do you ever go back to those for ideas, like mining them for ideas?
Mm. Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes. Most of them are in my childhood home in North Carolina, so I'm not there now, so I can't see the earlier ones, but I do. Every now and then I'll sit back and like in a similar way I'll look through photos on my phone to try to remember my life because I too much happens sometimes to be consciously aware. But yeah, I'll go back and think about the person that I was when I wrote something how I've changed, and then the whole thing starts.
And is your phone just filled also with song ideas with voice memos?
I was gonna say, when you were saying, do I write lyrics or do I um type them? Honestly, most often it's just like voice memo to writing them down because yeah, it's full. Let me even see how many I have. Like a frightening amount. I don't like how reliant I am on this technology, but 1,330. Yeah.
So what I love about this is that this is the point in these interviews where songwriters do exactly what you do. They pull their phone out, a big heavy sigh of regret because of all the voice memos that are on there. I've heard, oh gosh, I had someone on, I think it was Magdalena Bay. I had those two on, and I think it was well into the several thousands she has on, it's funny. I mean, I was looking through mine too. Now I'm a prose writer, not a songwriter, but I have ideas on there. I never go back to them. I mean, and there was no organization to them either. I don't have any. I mean, do you have any organization or no?
I do. I do. I try to like give them relevant titles. I have folders, new songs, musings, sophomore album, EP, record, whatever. So yeah, I do. I do.
You are better than 99% of most people because most people, it's that, oh my gosh, I need to do this, but I'll never get around to it. Um, there are exceptions. I had on Lauren Mayberry Churches, and this was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago or something. I think she said she has an Excel spreadsheet, which that's pretty hardcore. I mean, that's even a different thing altogether.
Yeah, that's incredible. Wow. I should do that. It's just finding the time to like, because it takes so much longer to organize things than you expect. But that's incredible. Hmm.
Okay, now with the guitar, when you're writing with a guitar, and this is going to sound specific, but I think that this can affect how we create. Are you walking around? Are you sitting or are you standing when you're playing that guitar and you're kind of thinking up riffs and melodies and things like that?
Always sitting. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I rarely leave a room with the guitar. Like if I have it with me, it'll be in the same place because it just feels so private. Like I'm not apart from playing shows, I'm not used to being that person who's like, I'm just gonna play by the campfire. Like it's just not my thing. Um, so I'm always sitting. I stand if I'm practicing, rehearsing for something, but playing, practice, yeah, writing. I said,
Is there certain talk about that chair? I mean, I have certain places I like to write, certain times of day. Uh, and I was just telling someone this yesterday that I had an attorney actually tell me that for part of their writing process, because they're writing briefs and they're certainly a writer, they're doing tons of writing, and they always have to write. I've never heard this before, but they always have to write with a winter coat on, even in the middle of the summer, because it gives them a sense of security and comfort.
that's amazing. That's great.
And I love that. Right? I mean, it's not that the jacket itself gives them superpowers, but it gives them a sense of comfort and security. And I think that's amazing, even though it's got to be incredibly uncomfortable in the middle of the summer. But I'd love to know what that ritual is like for you. Are there any quirks?
Mm,
Like I never write and revise in the same chair, and I'm definitely a morning person.
okay. Yeah. Oh, that's a good well quirks. I think I like to sit on beds if I can. If like my bed is sort of low enough for me. But because I've moved around a lot, I can't really I don't really have I just sit wherever I can. But in the past I've like done some of my best work on my bed in front of my writing apparatus. And what other quirks? I am a morning person, but then like academic writing versus music writing, very different vibe. I think I'm like much more like type A when it comes to academic writing, and it is morning, nothing else in my mind, go for it. But sometimes with songwriting, actually later in the day is better for me because then I've had time to for my like thoughts to settle and for other things to sort of come in and inspire me. Because I'm not thinking about much interesting stuff at 5 a.m. like creatively. But yeah.
I've interviewed songwriters who have had advanced degrees before, but they've completed them. I think you could be the first that's actually engaged in one at the same while they're songwriting. As I'm thinking about this now, those are obviously two different types of writing papers and then eventually dissertation and songwriting. And I'm curious if it's hard to change mindsets because I feel like when you're writing songs, you can kind of sit back and just, you know, let the ether,
Mm.
grab the ideas out of thin air. But when you're writing papers, you don't have the luxury often of doing that. So has that been difficult? And maybe one makes the other one more effective. I don't know, but I'd love to get your take on if it's hard just to change hats in that sense.
Mm. I think so. Yeah, it is. Because I don't think of, even though it is, I don't think of academic writing as very creative. And so it's like sort of switching between like my, you know, it's not even scientific, but just to create this like false dichotomy, like, scientific versus artistic way of thinking. Um, and so it is hard because sometimes I'll sit down to write a song after I've like finished a paper or something, and I'll still be thinking in that like academic writing, and I'm like, I need to get like this needs to come, like something needs to happen. Whereas it's a very different posture when I'm just trying to observe the world and pay attention to the world and pay attention to my mind. So it does become, it does start to feel sometimes like, oh, songwriting is another assignment, which it's not in my book, and I don't want it to be. So I have to like deliberately sometimes even give myself space between academic writing and songwriting to just like change into a different way of being entirely. So
So when you say distance, do we mean like like temporal distance? You've got to give yourself, you can't just flow from one to the other. You need to give yourself um hours or days or something like that or something like that.
yeah, I just need to relax. Like I need to get rid of the tension of having to justify a thesis and then just like chill out and breathe and then I can write. Yeah.
As I'm thinking about this, and again, I've never written a song in my life, so I'm just purely riffing on this idea. But I could see after you've been in the trenches of an academic paper, writing a song almost would feel like a relief,
Mhm.
like a really or a relief or a release.
Yeah.
The same way that I might go for a run after something like that. Um, so I could see that being an easier change
Yeah.
than going from songwriting to academic writing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I definitely in my earlier years of songwriting and academic writing, it was a release. Like I would finish a paper and I'd just be like, "Oh, I can't just get it out. Let me just." It was sort of relaxing and the space to soothe myself and just let thoughts flow without feeling like I needed to sort of contain them. Um, but yeah, I think academic writing is just a muscle that you same with songwriting. It's just a muscle that you sort of work. And so once you've done it a couple hundred times, it'll come. It comes again. So I'm not too worried about that songwriting to academic writing. Yeah.
Is it difficult to write when we're writing about grief? Is it difficult? I mean, Hemingway famously said he could never write about Paris when he was in Paris. He always needed that distance. So I see that as not just physical distance, but metaphorical distance. Um, is do you need distance to be able to write about a certain topic, or is immediacy better?
Hmm. I think they're both really useful because sometimes the expressions that you have or that you can sort of try to embody when you're in it, you can't necessarily access once you have that distance. So I like to, I don't know. I think when it comes to grief, I think maybe I would just sort of express what I needed to in the moment. Honestly, maybe not even in the moment. Maybe I think maybe there still always is a tiny bit of distance because in the moment you just are just feeling whatever it is in your experience. So, but like shortly after, say things, but without any intention of like refining or like having them mean anything necessarily. And then you sort of return to that like well of sort of raw emotion and experience, and then that then can turn into something and influence your later writing.
And when you're writing about those things that have an intensity of emotion, whatever the emotion is, are you less likely to revise those things that came from that urgency, the immediacy?
I think so. Yeah. In my experience, whenever I've been in an kind of emotional crisis, for whatever reason, um, the things that I say are they're just sort of better in my view. Like it's just they're more real. They sort of cut to the quick of whatever it is I want to express, and so I don't necessarily have to revise because I just it feels right. It's not always the case, but in general, I will say that there's like an awareness that comes with experiencing something and writing about it in the moment that can be lost when it becomes like an intellectual exercise.
And how often do you get ideas when your brain is engaged in an unconscious activity? So, Agatha Christie said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. And I love that quote. I give that to songwriters all the time because the songwriters who tell me that they get ideas when they are driving, but I've also heard cleaning, um, doing the dishes, folding laundry, vacuuming, gardening. And there's something to be said, it's been written about when our brains are engaged in an unconscious activity, requires no thought whatsoever. That's when the creative things happen. So do you ever notice that happens to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There was a month or so, like a couple of years ago, that I decided just to not listen to any music intentionally. I just wasn't going to put anything on, and I was running a lot. And even when I was still sort of playing songs and writing, but just not more input. And I would sit down and try to write, and I'd be stuck, and I'm like, I don't really like this. And then I would go for a walk or a run, and it was like, oh my god, how am I gonna pull my phone out while I'm I'm, like, trying to record my voice memo because this something just came to me in the middle of this run. Um, so that would happen a lot where it was like I was stuck on something and then I would go for a walk and it would all come together, or I would, be talking to a friend and then I'm just like, "Oh, wait, 1 second. I just had an idea about this." Yeah.
There's a great book called The Friendship by Adam Sisman, and he's either at Oxford or Cambridge, one of those two. Um, and it's about the friendship between Wordsworth and Coleridge, the romantic poets. And both of them composed their poems almost entirely on walks,
Wow.
um, and revised them in their mind as they were walking, which Wordsworth was famous for that. They said he walked like 100,000 miles in his life, which, if you do the math, it's some ridiculous amount. But what else did they have to do, I guess, back then in the
Mm.
Lake District, other than walk around? But they would compose, and one of them needed flat terrain, and the other one needed rocky terrain. I forgot which one it was, but the type of terrain was more fruitful for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. That's a I've never thought about that, which would be more fruitful for.
Well, I think that the important thing is if you're, at least for me, if I'm walking and moving in a place that's familiar, I don't have to focus on my surroundings. But if you put me in a place I've never been, your brain, I mean, your executive function is practically, I mean, you're either trying not to get lost or there's the old primitive element of probably just being aware of your surroundings. All right, now I'm going to end with this. I always ask songwriters how much reading they do, but I realize all you're doing is reading. So this is going to be a different question because and I don't know how you're having time to do any pleasurable reading when you're reading for school all the time. But are there certain types of, well, first of all, I'll explain my habits and I'd love to get your feedback on this. So uh I'm not really a genre person. My first instinct when I finish something is to read something different by someone else because I don't want the same voice in my head all the time.
Okay.
So if you ask me who my favorite author is, I probably couldn't answer that, even in my favorite genre. So I'd love to get your take on, if you have one,
Yeah.
maybe outside of the stuff that you're studying and the impact that has on your songwriting too.
Hmm. I think so surprisingly, I haven't done much reading for pleasure, but I have done some, and I have in this phase of my life, I'm really drawn to, like, writings about spirituality and, like, from all traditions. So, right, I'm trying to work through this book by this, French author, philosopher, Simone Weil, and I was reading this book by Thomas Merton, and I think more than anything right now, the genres that I'm drawn to are the ones that sort of do the work of pulling me out of whatever, you know, theoretical mindset I'm in. Because if I can't always I don't have the time to go for, like, a 45-minute walk all the time, at least I can, like, read 10 pages and have the voice in my head be reminding me of a way of being that I don't inhabit at the moment. So, yeah, I would say right now I'm drawn to, like, things that that are sort of mystical or spiritual or about, yeah, human connection, in a very kind of foggy way. Yeah.
So are there certain authors you prefer, or how do you find those books?
There are certain authors that I prefer. I think I have, like, an insanely long list of authors that I want to read, that I've heard of, that have been recommended, that I haven't gotten around to. So I'm just working through little by little, but it helps when I, like, encounter an author in real life, not like a living one, but, like, I'll, you know, go to a museum or something and see, like, an exhibition about this someone or someone quotes an author in their article, and I'm like, "Oh," then that kind of reminds me to go back to someone on the list. Yeah.
How about do art galleries inspire you as a songwriter?
Definitely, definitely. When I get to go to them, I'm like I mean, it's just so nice to remember that there are ways to, like, feel and understand yourself and relationships with other people that are not just, like, word based. Because I think I'm a very, like, word oriented person, and so I think art is really challenging, like, visual art is really challenging and, like, exciting in that way because you sort of have to ask yourself, "How are people communicating without the thing that I think you need to communicate?" And it sort of, yeah, erases that notion and then makes my writing more interesting because 'cause I'm yeah.
It's funny you say that because I've heard that answer, but some people practically get inspired by the titles of the paintings.
Yeah, that too.
Very literal. Okay, so last question and follow up. It's a very particular one again. I used to be the type of reader that I had to finish books no matter how much I didn't like it because I hated the concept of just giving up on this thing. And I probably wasted a lot of time doing that. So if you start a book that you don't like, Do you insist on seeing it through, or are you okay with not finishing it?
I'm fine with not finishing it. It doesn't bother me. Because if I don't know, I don't want to waste the time. Like I could do something I actually like instead. I don't want to I don't want to read the rest of this. I might like read a summary of the rest just to know that I have an idea of what happens, but I'm not I don't feel tied to finishing books.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can find all the episodes on all major streaming platforms and also at the Songwriters on Process website. That is at songwritersonpodcast.com. Pre-2020, this was not a pod. I was transcribing all of the interviews. So you can find all of them, hundreds of them, many hundreds of them on the Songwriters on Process website. You'll find both the transcribed interviews and the pod there. Take a deep dive, spend a day. These are great conversations with songwriters just about the writing process. Also, my book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, is out now worldwide on Hachette Books. You can find it online in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God, and it's his memoir. Again, that is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari. I am biased, but that's a damn good book. My email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love suggestions, questions, comments. People always email me and tell me who they want to see on the pod next. You never know. Send me an email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. That's it for me, everyone. Have a great day.